Behind the Iron Curtain, a veil of secrecy shrouded the Soviet Union. This was a time when the world was divided by ideology, and the Iron Curtain symbolized the stark divide between the East and the West, Soviet science and the shadow of secrecy. In the heart of the Soviet Union, scientific endeavors were often conducted in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Laboratories were dimly lit, and the air was thick with the tension of secrecy, the Cold War, a time of global tension. The world watched as the Soviet Union and the United States engaged in a fierce ideological struggle, each vying for supremacy on the world stage. The Soviet Union and the United States were locked in an ideological struggle. This battle was not just about military might but also about proving the superiority of their respective ways of life. Both superpowers sought dominance in every sphere. From the depths of the oceans to the vast expanse of space, no frontier was left unexplored in their quest for superiority. Science and technology were key battlegrounds. The race to achieve scientific breakthroughs was intense, with each side striving to outdo the other in a bid to demonstrate their technological prowess. Within the Soviet Union, a culture of secrecy prevailed. Scientists worked under the watchful eyes of the state, their research cloaked in mystery and often hidden from the public. Research programs operated in the shadows. These programs were often highly classified, with only a select few privy to the details of the work being conducted. They were driven by a relentless pursuit of scientific breakthroughs, no matter the cost. The pressure to achieve results was immense, and failure was not an option. The government poured resources into classified projects. They explored cutting-edge fields. Funding was abundant for those who could promise groundbreaking discoveries. These included rocketry, nuclear physics, and human experimentation. The boundaries of ethical research were often pushed to their limits in the name of progress. Moral boundaries blurred in this pursuit of knowledge. The desire to achieve scientific breakthroughs sometimes overshadowed ethical considerations. The Soviet leadership believed that any means justified the end. They were willing to take extreme measures to ensure their scientific and technological dominance, especially if it meant surpassing the West. The competition with the United States was fierce, and the Soviet Union was determined to come out on top. In the annals of history, some experiments became infamous. These experiments are remembered not just for their scientific contributions, but also for the ethical questions they raised. One such experiment took place in 1947. This experiment would become one of the most controversial and chilling chapters in the history of Soviet science. This chilling chapter would forever stain the pursuit of scientific understanding. The events of this experiment would leave a lasting impact on the scientific community and the world at large. The Soviet sleep deprivation experiment remains a chilling reminder. It serves as a stark example of the lengths to which some will go in the name of scientific progress. It reminds us of the potential for human cruelty in the name of progress. The experiment pushed the boundaries of human endurance and revealed the darker side of scientific ambition. This experiment, shrouded in secrecy, aimed to test the limits of human endurance. The researchers sought to understand how far the human body and mind could be pushed without sleep. It sought to understand the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation. The subjects were monitored closely as they were deprived of sleep for extended periods. Little did the researchers know, their work would unleash a terrifying chain of events. The results of the experiment were far more disturbing than they had anticipated. It would reveal the darkest corners of the human psyche. The experiment exposed the fragility of the human mind and the extreme effects of sleep deprivation. At the heart of this chilling experiment lay a mysterious stimulant gas. The exact composition of this gas remains unknown. The Soviets kept its formula classified. It has never been replicated. However, accounts from the time, pieced together from fragmented reports and whispered rumors, paint a disturbing picture. This gas, a volatile cocktail of chemicals, was designed to induce extreme wakefulness. It promised to keep subjects alert and functional for extended periods. It targeted the areas of the brain that regulate sleep-wake cycles. The gas essentially short-circuited the body's natural need for rest. Initial tests on animals yielded alarming results. Animals exposed to the gas displayed heightened alertness and increased activity levels. But these benefits came at a steep price. The animals became increasingly agitated and aggressive. Their behavior grew erratic and unpredictable. Despite these alarming signs, the Soviet researchers pressed on. Driven by Cold War paranoia, they saw the gas's potential military applications. Imagine soldiers who could fight for days without rest, or pilots who could fly missions without succumbing to fatigue. The lure of such an advantage proved irresistible. The test subjects, deemed expendable by the Soviet regime, were political prisoners. These individuals were often those who had dared to speak out against the oppressive government, or were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were stripped of their rights and humanity, reduced to mere tools for the regime's sinister experiments. They were deemed enemies of the state. The Soviet propaganda machine worked tirelessly to paint these prisoners as threats to national security, justifying their inhumane treatment. The regime's narrative was clear: these individuals were dangerous, and their removal from society was necessary for the greater good. These individuals, deemed expendable in the grand scheme of Soviet ambition, were locked in a sealed chamber. The chamber was designed to isolate them completely, cutting off any hope of escape or communication with the outside world. It was a cold, sterile environment, devoid of any comfort or humanity. Their only connection to the outside world was a thick glass window. Through this window they could see the silhouettes of the researchers, their faces obscured and indifferent. The glass served as a constant reminder of their captivity and the powerlessness they felt. The gas was pumped into the chamber, and the researchers, observing from behind the safety of the glass, meticulously documented every change in the subject's behavior. The gas was a mysterious compound, designed to keep the subjects awake indefinitely, pushing the boundaries of human endurance and sanity. As the days turned into sleepless nights, the subjects began to exhibit a chilling transformation. Their eyes grew hollow, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The lack of sleep took a toll on their physical and mental health, eroding their sense of self. Deprived of sleep, their minds started to unravel. The once clear distinction between reality and hallucination blurred, leading to a state of perpetual confusion and fear. The subjects' mental faculties deteriorated rapidly, leaving them vulnerable to the darkest corners of their psyche. At first, the effects were subtle: increased irritability, difficulty concentrating, and hallucinations. These early signs were just the beginning of a much more profound and terrifying descent into madness. The subjects struggled to maintain a grip on their sanity, but the relentless deprivation of sleep made it an impossible task. But as the experiment progressed, the subjects' behavior became increasingly erratic and disturbing. They began to lash out at each other and themselves, driven by an overwhelming sense of desperation and hopelessness. The chamber, once a place of confinement, became a theater of horror. They exhibited signs of paranoia and delusion. The subjects became convinced that unseen forces were conspiring against them, their minds fabricating elaborate and terrifying scenarios. Trust, already a scarce commodity, vanished entirely as they turned on one another. The prisoners became convinced that the researchers were plotting against them. Every glance, every note taken by the scientists was interpreted as evidence of a sinister plan. The subjects' paranoia reached a fever pitch, driving them to the brink of insanity. Their humanity seemed to fade away, replaced by something primal and terrifying. The subjects regressed to a state of raw, animalistic behavior, driven by base instincts and a desperate need for survival. The veneer of civilization was stripped away, revealing the primal core beneath. The once ordinary men were now shadows of their former selves, trapped in a waking nightmare of their own making. Their transformation was complete, and they were no longer recognizable as the individuals who had entered the chamber. They had become something else entirely, a testament to the horrors of the experiment. They had become, for all intents and purposes, the monsters the researchers had feared creating. The experiment, intended to push the boundaries of human endurance, had instead revealed the fragility of the human mind and the terrifying potential for transformation under extreme conditions. As the experiment progressed, a horrifying new development emerged. The initial goal was to observe the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation on human subjects, but what unfolded was far more sinister. The subjects began exhibiting signs of addiction to the stimulant gas. Their eyes, once filled with curiosity and determination, now reflected a desperate need for the very substance that was destroying them. The very substance that was robbing them of their humanity had become the sole object of their desire. The gas, initially meant to keep them awake, had taken over their minds and bodies. Whenever the gas supply was temporarily cut off for observation purposes, the subjects would become frantic. Their once calm demeanor would shift to one of sheer panic and desperation. They would claw at the vents, their bodies racked with tremors. The physical manifestations of their addiction were undeniable, and the researchers could only watch in horror. Their pleas for more gas became desperate, their voices reduced to raspy whispers. The once articulate subjects were now reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, begging for the very thing that was killing them. They had become slaves to the chemical that was destroying them. Their every thought, every action, was driven by an insatiable need for the gas. The researchers watched in horror as the subject's self-destructive spiral intensified. What was meant to be a controlled experiment had spiraled into a nightmare. The men, driven mad by sleep deprivation and their addiction to the gas, turned on each other. The bonds that once held them together were now shattered. What started as verbal arguments escalated into brutal physical altercations. The chamber, once a place of scientific inquiry, had become a battleground. The chamber, once a sterile environment for scientific observation, descended into chaos. Equipment was destroyed, and the once orderly space was now a scene of utter devastation. The subjects, their minds warped beyond recognition, were no longer capable of rational thought or human connection. Their eyes, once filled with life, now stared vacantly into the abyss. They had become prisoners of their own fractured psyches, forever tethered to the gas that had stolen their sleep and their sanity. The walls of the chamber, once a place of study, had become their prison. The experiment, initially intended to push the boundaries of human endurance, had transformed into a horrifying spectacle of human degradation. The researchers, once hopeful of groundbreaking discoveries, were now faced with the grim reality of their creation. The line between science and horror had been irrevocably blurred.